Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Bookum Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley, and this is a special episode of Founders Talk Podcast, a podcast for founders to tell their stories, ideas, and visions of the future. This episode is brought to you by Bookum, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookumapp.com. Make sure to give this video a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. My guest today is the insightful Dave Chesson. Dave is the founder and mind behind Kindlepreneur.com, a website devoted to teaching authors about book marketing. Kindlepreneur has grown to be one of the largest book marketing websites in the world. Dave is a Navy vet, a nuclear engineer, and an explorer, a writer. He's fluent in Mandarin. He's a father, and he enjoys a good whiskey. Dave, welcome to the Founders Talk podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And again, thank you for your service, especially with Memorial Day weekend just passing. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Well, it was my pleasure being able to serve, and it's Memorial Day is a very special day. We've had family members of our own that have paid the ultimate price. Count myself lucky not to be one of those, but absolute mad respect for those who did so.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, absolute respect to you as well. And speaking of that, being kind of like, I don't know if this plays into it, but I'm curious, like being an engineer, like nuclear engineer before being an entrepreneur, how did that like background of engineering influence your approach to problem solving, specifically in the self-publishing industry?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny. In truth, I kind of wasn't so much a engineer kind of person. Matter of fact, I really crammed my square peg through that round hole, and I cut off every corner I could just to get through it. Just so happens, it's kind of funny in nuclear engineering, they don't let you shoot from the hip. Go figure. You got to follow the procedures and everything like that. That being said, though, is that it was wonderful because when I was training for nuclear engineering, they taught me how to learn. And honestly, it's through that the Navy's nuclear program is 6 months. So they literally teach you everything you need to know about nuclear engineering in 6 months, and then you get 6 months of prototype. And so in that, you have to learn a lot about yourself, your best ways of learning, how you approach it. That was wonderful. For me, though, I've always been a major creative. And so it really helped me to take my creative side and then add a bit of an engineering side together. And the two things have really formed, I would say, a great one-two punch. And so for me now as an entrepreneur, I get to constantly say to myself, man, wouldn't it be nice if? And I'm like, great, let's go implement and get that done. Yep. So it's really a wonderful two sides of the coin.
No, I love that. And especially just being an entrepreneur and a founder. Talk to us a little bit, like what was the biggest challenge when you were first starting building Kindlepreneur, and how you were able to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, luckily a lot of that was really blind faith. I always say, like, being an entrepreneur, it reminds me of that scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where, it's like he's got to have blind faith and step out over the ledge.
Oh, yeah.
And if he does it in faith, he will land and he's fine. But if he doesn't, he'll fall, right? To me, that's always felt a little bit about it. You really have to take a leap of faith. And on top of that, you have to really back that up with a lot of sweat, blood, tears, in order to get there. My wife and I really enjoy talking about our entrepreneurial journey in front of the kids so they can see the highs and lows. It's almost like a roller coaster. Day one, woo, day two, and so that's really been kind of a big part of it. But I would say, I think one of the things that's made or really helped me to be successful is truly the word discipline.
Yeah.
And that's not like a knock on anybody who hasn't, succeeded. If you're hearing that and you think that the word discipline is like, oh, he thinks I didn't have discipline. I'm like, no, I'm not pushing that. What I'm saying is it's a crucial aspect that I think is really important. For me, when I first started, especially on Kindlepreneur back in the day, I got up at 4 a.m. every morning. And matter of fact, I had a rule for myself that if I didn't get my fingers to the keyboard by 4:15 in the morning, I was not allowed to have coffee for the entire day. It was absolutely self-masochistic, but let me tell you what, I got my fingers to the keyboard by 4:15 every morning. And I did that because I was a father during the day. I was still in the military at the time. And if I didn't do that, I would never have progressed over time. So the discipline of, getting fingers to the keyboard by 4:15 a.m. until about 7 a.m. which is when I'd start getting ready, put on my uniform, going to work. If I hadn't have done that, I might still today be saying one day, oh boy, wouldn't it be nice if I wrote my book? Wouldn't it be great? You know, and all these other things. So really, I think it comes back to discipline and being very particular about your schedule.
No, that discipline is everything when it comes to being an entrepreneur too. And even when you're talking, it kind of reminded me of when, when people, it's that Field of Dreams quote, it's like build it and they come, but that's not really how it, not in entrepreneurship. It doesn't happen like that. So
There's lottery ticket winners out there. There are people that win the lottery. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll acknowledge that might happen. That being said, though, is I don't go to buy a lottery ticket and expect to win.
No.
So yeah, but it's funny as that statement of, if you build it, they will come. Like I chuckle every time I hear it.
No, you got to be in the trenches. So like when you got those, how was it getting those first customers and to kind of believe in what you're building?
Well, in truth, I have my own kind of belief structure in business, and it doesn't mean that it has to be the same thing everybody else does, but I believe that it's important to have the market first and then build a product, not the other way around. Silicon Valley, I think, gets it wrong a lot, especially in software. What they do is they find somebody who is really smart, really capable, and then they help to plant the right idea that can scale to something big. And then they kind of help them, get the right resources, and they pump money into them. And then that person goes off and they try to build something that has what's called product market fit, right? And
Yeah.
it's the hope that the market itself will adopt what they're creating. And then from there, that they'll be able to scale and that it has massive market and they can cross the chasm, all these things.
Exactly.
And it's a bet. And the thing is that if you find out less than 10% of those succeed, the other 90% fail. However, though, I say that in business, it's almost always better to go the opposite direction. First, have the market, have their attention, and then through that, you will know exactly what people want. From there, you're able to then create the right product. You're not guessing at product market fit. And quite frankly, you can make very strategic calculations about how much it's going to cost to build this thing as to how much you believe that your existing market will do it. And so I've always enjoyed that process. And so coming back to Kindlepreneur back in the day, my thing was I actually really started focusing on learning search engine optimization, SEO. That's been my number one skill set from day one. I did this on my first books. I went to Amazon, figured out what people wanted to read and that they couldn't find. And then I went and wrote that book and got at the top of Amazon and was bringing in, new customers every day to my book. And so I applied that to Kindlepreneur. I built it out by, being able to make sure that every day, Kindlepreneur gets 30 to 40,000 readers a day,
Yeah.
Through those. That means that we're getting hundreds of email signups. And so it allows you to then, once you've done a lot to teach and educate and help, you also, I'm always in my email, reading, responding to people, answering their questions, and it helps you to understand what is it that people need. And from there, you can turn around and really build solid products.
No, as well said, Dave. And when you're talking about it, kind of when you're talking about product market fit, I also kind of want to ask like what effective strategies for authors, like because obviously they have to have these when it comes to product market fit. Like how do you get that? What's the effective strategy for or rule of thumb do you have for like boosting sales and making sure your story connects to people on Amazon?
Yeah. So just to make sure I understand the question, is it more about like how do you connect with the author community specifically, or just kind of in general in business?
Yeah, I'd say more general, just like when it comes to like putting your book up on Amazon, like some good rule strategies, like so that at least like, hey, I put this keyword or something specific and it's resonating with the right audience.
Right. Well, a lot of that is, first off, it's really important to know what keywords people really not only type into Amazon, but what they want to buy from. So a great example that I give to people is if I say back pain, if I type in back pain into Amazon, what are the chances that Amazon's going to be able to present to me the perfect book for exactly what I'm looking for? Same thing goes with like fantasy. If I type into Amazon fantasy book, what are the chances that Amazon's going to present to me the right fantasy book? Well, I'll tell you, it's 8%. That's what our database has found is on 8% of the time that somebody types in such a broad phrase that somebody will select and buy a book. However, though, when you start getting to more descriptive phrases, the percentage of people that purchase a book off of that results increases dramatically. It even gets up to about 45%. And so what happens for authors is it's incredibly important that you not only choose keywords that people type in, but you choose keywords that people will then end up buying from. And when
Yeah.
you do that, not only are you then starting to get your book in front of more people, but you're actually getting them in front of more real shoppers, the people that will then execute. And so the first thing I say to authors, and this is incredibly important, especially if you're new or you're trying to develop your author career, is getting your keywords right really helps you to show up and to find your market. So starting with that, the second thing that's really important too, and this is a second part to it, is making sure that your book converts well. Okay. Nothing worse than, you get all the traffic, you find people, they're finding your book, and nobody wants to buy your book, right? And that's because a lot of times people either skip on creating a really good cover that's engaging. They maybe do a title, but they don't do a subtitle that helps people to understand what the book is about. And then when it finally comes to their book description, let's face it, most authors cringe when it comes time to writing their book description. That's true. We can write, an 80,000 word book, but, heaven forbid we got to write the 500 word book description, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that if you've gotten somebody to type in a phrase, see your book cover, click on it, and then you finally get them to the finish line, which is your book description. If you don't have that, they're not going to come through with the sale. And so there's a lot of authors that will skimp on those things, or they'll quickly rush on those things. And they may get lots of shoppers seeing their book, but they're not convincing the shoppers to buy. And so I really think that those are the three most important things that authors can do to truly drive not only sales, but consistent sales.
Yeah, and do you have to continue to update your page? I know, like sometimes with SEO, like if I wrote an article that's winning in 2018, I might add a little bit to improve the book. I mean, the article over time. Is it the same way on Amazon, or is it like, oh, or is it more like if it's evergreen, it's evergreen no matter what?
Well, actually, the fun thing about Amazon's algorithm, and by the way, the fun fact is that the search algorithm of Amazon has its own name. It's called A9. Okay,
Yeah.
and A9, the really good thing for A9 is A9 knows what makes money. Like, whereas in Google, Google's trying to guess that, okay, somebody saw this article, they clicked on it. Did they stay long? Did they read it? Did they scroll? Did they click back? Did they stay on the website? Like, they can use those metrics, right? Amazon's like, did people buy it? It's that easy. So what Amazon's looking for is, hey, when I show book A, we make this much money. But when I show book B in that same spot, we make this much money. And whichever one makes more money is the one that they choose. Because then, I mean, Amazon's in the game of making more money. That's it. Best way to understand Amazon is ask yourself, what makes them more money? That's what they're doing, and that's why they're doing it. So in this particular case, it really doesn't matter whether or not you've updated the information or anything. What they want to see is life. They want to see that people are showing up and buying. This is important. Like, for example, those of you who have like an autoresponder email list where you're constantly sending people who bought other books of yours, and then you send them to this one. This is where Amazon ads have like what I call a tertiary effect. Some people are like, oh, well, I did my ads, and my the amount of books sold directly from my ads was like this tiny amount. And the next question I like to ask people is, okay, but what about your overall sales and also your pages read? How did that go? Oh, well, those just took off. Okay. So you might not like the amount directly from your ads, but guess what? You injected more life into the book, and Amazon started showing it off more.
Yeah.
And so a lot of authors, they might not see the direct benefit of the ads, and they'll see the indirect, and they'll start saying, well, that's different. I'm like, whoa, just notice that a couple of days after you did those ads, you started making more natural sales. You had more pages read, and that comes to fruition over time. So just kind of keep those things in mind.
No, that's great advice. And when it comes to, I guess now you're not just competing with some of the best writers in the world, but also now you're competing with AI and stuff. I've seen that as more of a boom. Like, how has AI impacted like book sales and like ranking for people that aren't using it? And like when it comes to people now being able to upload their books so much faster using AI tools, like how do they
Yeah,
compete?
AI is one of those. So it's kind of funny. Any type of marketing tactic, I've always told people, you can always turn a marketing tactic spammy real quick. Like, you
True.
know, it depends on how you use it. If you're using email marketing, it can be spammy if you're sending them email every 6 hours, or if you're just like, buy my book, like Whereas you can craft something amazing that benefits the reader, they enjoy it, and you're using the system to get connected. So I always like to talk about marketing from any marketing tactic can always be spammy. It just depends on how people do it. Well, the same thing can be said about AI. You know, if you're a great writer and you're using AI to assist you in putting together something faster, great. You know, um, that's wonderful because you're still making great products, you're benefiting people, and it allows you to be more effective and efficient in your writing. Cool. But then there's going to be a lot of people where we see, and this is not knocking on people outside of the United States or anything like that, but there are a lot of people where English is not their primary language. And so they're starting to use AI as their prime way of like, oh, I can finally write books and get them into the US market. We are seeing a major increase in those happening. And also, even though Amazon hasn't announced this, I have enough data to prove that they do this. They have dramatically increased their threshold for closing accounts.
Oh, okay.
And that's happening more so in foreign, those who live outside of America. There's key countries that might have a higher threshold, or excuse me, a lower threshold. I won't say the names of them per se because I really don't want to drive down that route, but it's almost, the data doesn't lie. There are certain countries that if you're in that country, you have a much higher propensity to get your just account banned if they see anything that looks like. And I think a lot of this, and this is where I'm making a connection between the two things. I think Amazon started to try to fight back on anything that feels like AI generated information especially from areas where English might not be the primary language. To them, and it's important for Amazon to make sure that the quality of the products people are buying are good enough.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos once said is we don't make money when people purchase things. We make money when people come back and buy more things,
Right.
which is talking about not the short term, but the long term. And if Amazon continuously provides books that suck, right? I mean, AI generated, not improved, and everything like that, they're going to lose in the long run.
Yeah.
And they don't want that. So I would say that we're seeing Amazon take some actions to help reduce the amount of just pure AI generated books. It is something that authors should be aware of and ensure that they're not getting caught up in that. But AI in general can be something that helps you to become more effective and efficient over time if you're using it right.
Yeah, because otherwise you could kind of just take like the like Tom Clancy approach or even like a Patterson or James Patterson approach where you just post. I mean, you could like produce like 40 books a year if you actually were a solid reader and get that market traction because of Amazon's massive user base. But yeah, I kind of want to like how much, I guess last point on this a little bit is like how much is like self-publishing more like gamified in that sense, like strategy based? And this can kind of go into publishing Rocket and then how it also like is more intuitive in the way you craft. Like how do you balance that duology?
Well, so that's a really good question. I like that question. I kind of envision a scale. Okay. There's the kind of author that they're like, I'm going to write this book and I'm just going to throw it up there on Amazon and, it should do well because it's a good written book or it's well written book, excuse me. To that particular author, and that's on one end of the scale. Okay. To that particular author, I'd say, look, you are like, I mean, that's kind of a gamble. Okay.
Yeah.
The market is a lot more competitive than it used to be. There are a lot more, publishing companies back in the day, by the way, used to thumb their nose at Amazon. They used to be like, whatever, like that's not real publishing. And now they're realizing, oh my goodness, all the money comes from there. We better get involved. I've been a paid consultant to major publishing companies, helping them to kind of understand a little bit about, hey guys, Amazon does this. You guys always did that, but you got to do this, So everyone's getting smarter to an extent. Okay. There's millions of books on there, whereas, years ago, there weren't that many. So the idea of an author just saying, hey, I'm going to throw it up there and we'll see how it goes, like that's dying quickly, dying more so by every day. Also, too, for the authors out there that are like, well, I'm going to write a good book and I'm going to get a publishing company to publish me. That's also dying really quickly. And because what's happening is published companies are now saying, and this, I'm going to put you in their spot. Okay. They're a business. They want to publish the books that will make them the most money. back in the day, it used to be they would use their market research and say, okay, this genre is trending. Let's get some books in. Let's figure out which book we like, and then we'll figure out what we market. However, though, today, um, publishing companies are realizing you can look at self-published authors. Go find ones that are showing they can write really good books, that write in that genre, or writing in that trope that they know is hot, and then they go try to convince them to come over and sign a really good deal with them because they can see the data. They could see that this author A can write good books, B writes in what they want, C makes good sales, so they know marketing, which is better than an author that doesn't, and D are ones who have followings, have email lists, have social media.
Yeah.
It's a slam dunk to the publishing company. So they're now turning to going after self-published authors that kind of know how to play the game. So again, that's the one side of the spectrum, is the one that just says, I'm going to throw it up there and see what happens. On the other side of the spectrum is ones that, are like uber good marketers, that they know all the tricks and, things to do. And they can really pump out things. And so you have those two spectrums. Authors should really try to strive over time to learn and to go from left to right, from left being just throw it up there to the right being uber marketers. You don't have to be an uber marketer to succeed, but your chances of succeeding increase with the more you understand how to put your book on Amazon, how to help Amazon understand what it is, how to get it in front of those right keywords, how to have the right categories, how to do advertisement that continues to push life into your book so that Amazon continues to care about it. When you do those things, you are going to be a step ahead of the rest. And for those that might feel disheartened by what I've said, just know that a mass majority of authors don't understand this. It's while there are millions of books out there, if you take the time to really help to understand it, you actually learn how to choose your keywords, you understand the category system, you understand advertisement, you're going to be ahead of a mass majority of the other authors out there. You will have a competitive advantage. So just kind of keep that in mind as you do. The more you learn, the better you grow. The more you grow, the faster you will hit profitability.
Yeah, and I love that your tool, Publishing Rocket, at least helps simplify that for people so they can say, okay, this market is what I already enjoy writing in this market, but now I can see if I do this correctly, the value and that I can get from writing in this market. So can you explain a little bit how like Publishing Rocket works and how it can help authors with their book marketing?
Yeah, so Publisher Rocket really answers a lot of those questions. I designed it with that in mind.
Yeah.
Truth be told, though, before I get into that, let me start with saying that for years, publishing companies have used this kind of information to make their decisions. And for the longest time, us self-published authors, we didn't have that. We had to kind of guess at things. We had to, trial and tribulations. Then Publisher Rocket came about, and what we did was we actually kind of, it's almost like pulling back the curtain of Amazon and showing the wizard, pulling all the levers. And so what we did was we created a keyword feature that tells you what words people type into Amazon, how many people are typing that in, and also gives you an indication of how well books sell in that keyword. So we give a red, yellow, green light system. Then we also have a competition analyzer that helps you to look at the other books, know how much money they're making, how well they're doing, some key information about them so you can learn about your competitors. We have a category system that lists off all of Amazon categories and tells you how many sales you would need to make in order to be the #1 bestseller,
Yeah.
which makes choosing categories that much easier. It also tells you which ones are ghost categories, which, by the way, 1/4 of every category in Amazon is a ghost category, which is a category where no matter what you do, you can't be a bestseller for it. It's like a fake category.
Wow.
So it will tell you to avoid those categories. And again, 25% of them are ghosts. So keep that in mind. And then with our Amazon ad system, it makes creating profitable ads effective and efficient. So instead of hours and hours of copy and pasting or so, it can help you to generate these keywords. And by the way, something that I haven't made public, but in a couple of weeks from recording of this, we will have a brand new Amazon ads feature that I think is going to blow people's
Oh,
minds.
dope.
We've been working on this for over a year, and I am so jazzed about it. So anyways, yeah, so that's
Yeah.
Rocket in a nutshell.
No, I love when creators and founders build the tools that they've kind of always wanted for the user base. Like I've seen it right now with Mr. Beast dropping like view stats, and it's just like it helps so much because you're like I've known that this has been important. Now I can give it back to the people, and they decide ultimately how they use it. I think that's really important. Like what kind of genres have you seen pop off that you're like, wow, that's surprising that that's trending so much? Like I think I seen a video where it was like, was it lit RPGs or something are just like blowing up right now? I'm curious like what even ones are surprising you.
Well, I mean, the hottest genre in the entire book industry is romantasy.
Yeah, of course.
And I mean, but that's a little bit more obvious, we'll put it that way. Uh, but by the way, I was super jazzed. I just saw the other day that Rebecca Yaros owns Publisher Rocket. So, for the author of Fourth Wing. So that made me pretty jazzy about that. But needless to say, and by the way, she bought it before she wrote Fourth Wing, and she pivoted over to romantasy. So,
Interesting.
yep, my little writer heart is just squealing over that one. But that being said, though, is that yeah, we are finding that there's more of a shift of romance in other genres. So science fiction romance is really it. These are all picking up, and I think what happened was that when romantasy took off like crazy,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it became evident that there's other combinations that they can kind of pursue, and so that's been growing. Literature, role-playing games, lit RPG is, I wouldn't say it's a new one, but Amazon, it was so hot back in the day
Hmm.
that Amazon finally acknowledged it and gave it its own, category system, which is great. But for all the lit RPG fans, we all know that, not all lit RPGs are the same. You got cultivation, you got, wuxia, you got a whole bunch of other subgenres under that. The other thing that's really, it's hilarious if you really want to get nitty gritty. Hockey romance
Yeah,
is
big,
like super hot,
big.
which I'm a hockey player. I'm actually a goalie. And yeah, even at 40, I'm still playing ice hockey. Just played yesterday morning actually. And let me tell you what, the smell of hockey equipment, like I'm glad
Not
hockey
good.
players are getting some, recognition. But that being said, though, is I wonder if any of those hockey romances talk about the smell. Um, but that being said, though, is that's really picked up. And here's the thing about trends. You know, everybody remembers when the oh good lord, what was that vampire romance? Twilight,
Yeah, it was the
right?
Twilight.
When Twilight first came out, it just established like a real genre, like its own kind of trope and aspect and structure. If you had submitted a teen vampire romance novel to any of the publishers that touched that general area, they would have signed you in a second. They would have just signed because all they just needed. They didn't care how good the books was. They just needed something
Yeah.
that fit the mold. I mean, quite frankly, if I zap myself back in time and 1 week after, Twilight had just kind of taken off, and I had literally gone through and figured out how many chapters, how many pages, kind of the writing style. And then I went and I turned and I wrote a vampire romance novel, of the same mold, if you will, not copying, but of kind of the same feel, and sent it into that publisher, I would have walked out with massive deal. And it's just weird how that was. But that only goes to show that the publishing companies are watching for that. They're waiting for, something to get hot and they're ready to jump on it because they know that people, once they have the one, they crave for more.
Yeah,
With the success of Dune, the movie,
true.
it wouldn't shock me if at some point we start to see more, hard science starting to creep up. Now, that one's going to be a hard one. That could be a whole podcast episode on its own. But that being said, though, is you'll see a bunch of the other science fiction books of the ilk start to just rise in sales. And so it could be a book that sets it off. It could be news. Post-apocalyptic books crazily started selling well during, the COVID pandemic. Not, just so happens that people were more maybe thinking about that kind of thing. You know, so it could be news, it could be a book, it could be a success of a movie. These things can all of a sudden strike and bam, a whole new area just really takes off. And right
Yeah.
now, romanticy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, publishers tend to be like very mimetic in that sense. Like they see what's popping off and they go jump at it. So even when you're talking about it, like a lot of people we work with, content creators, tend to be in the romance genre. So I saw like the Emily Rath like pucking around, going around. I saw Hannah Grace's book going off, and you could just see like, oh, this is going on. And then you seen that collide with Book Talk and the
Oh,
Kraken, so like it was always brewing, and I think that just goes to show like obviously the strength of romance as a genre, even though people kind of still even it's clarity for me too when I hear you say that, because like all right, it only continues to prove that this genre continues to blow up, and it's because of those stories, and it's that blending of what you can do. And I also had a friend who was a hockey player off note. His house used to stink. Every time we used to go over his house, I'm like, dude, what is going on?
and it's a special smell too.
Yeah,
It's
it's not good
it's
at all.
indescribable. It's not like football equipment. It's not like it's got something. My
Yeah,
my 10-year-old son just got into playing hockey. He's now a goalie as well, and it's hilarious listening to him try to describe that smell, to
yeah.
mama. So
It's horrendous. I do want to get into you as a writer. Like,
yeah.
can you talk a little bit about your writing process? Like, even when it comes to just like obviously books, but then like writing as far as blogs and all that. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so first off with books, back in the day I used to use Evernote a lot.
Okay.
Evernote was one of those things where anytime I came across some really interesting fact or some really interesting story, I would just do an Evernote clip. And granted, I write a lot more in nonfiction. My fiction isn't that great, and I haven't really spent the time to try to truly improve the skill set, but it's a hobby of mine. I love fiction so much. Maybe one day. But with nonfiction, though, it's not just about teaching, it's also about connecting with stories and things that really help people to solidify the idea. I mean, if you think about it, way back in the beginning of human existence, we taught by stories. That's how things were passed on over generations. And so, like, a prime example of this was the other day I came across on social media, and it's a really sad story, but apparently back in like 1910, there was a woman who her husband had died and she had to take care of her two children. And she was apparently not, by social standards of the time, she was not a very attractive woman. And so in order to raise money for her children, she entered a contest for ugliest woman and she won. And then she worked for like one of the shows or so as the ugliest woman, and that was able, and it was such a horrible story. Like this poor woman had to suffer constant humiliation, but it was so that her children would have food and they would grow. Oh, what a gut punch. And I mean, my heart goes out to her. I mean, what an amazing person to do that. And now here's the thing. Am I writing on that? No. Do I have a story right now? Or am I trying to teach something that would play into? No. Not that I know of.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I like to take those stories that either there's a lesson in there, but there's a point in there, or there's heartstrings. And I will put it and I categorize it into Evernote. Now I have a different system. I'm more of a Trello guy. It's weird. It's more modern.
Yeah.
Evernote kind of made me mad back in the day, but I do. And so I have all these little clips, and it's just one way for me to kind of keep sources. And I know there's got to be like 1,000 in there. But what's interesting is that when I write a book or when I'm writing an article and I'm trying to, uh, solidify a point, I like to go there and I like to find these stories that really help to bring what I'm saying to the forefront, and help to make it better than just a lecture. Let's face it, the professor who gets up at the top, at the front of the class and lectures this is one thing. But the one that, weaves in stories and, examples and, here's a case study.
Yeah.
Those I think really bring everything home and solidify. It's not just knowledge, it's applied knowledge. And so that's one of the biggest things that I love. The other thing when it comes to writing blogs, my English teacher would cringe. That's okay. She cringed when I was in high school. So, nothing's changed. But I love to write like I talk. And matter of fact, I imagine that in my blog posts, it it should sound like this conversation we're having. I will do a lot of ... I will do a lot of, examples. I might have a run-on sentence. Like, I get that. And I know that the grammar, people out there might cringe a little bit, but I want my writing to feel conversational. And if we're teaching about something that's really deep or really complex, I'm not going to sit up there. I don't talk to people like that. I'm going to help to break it down. I'm going to talk through it. I'll throw in a story, and really help with that. And while that sounds crazy, I think it's worked well. I think people have really enjoyed digesting the information. And at the same time too, it's always good to invest in a really good editor. So let's all send good vibes to my editor, who has to deal with that, and helps clean it up so that, because it's also, by the way, it's really scary to write for writers.
Oh yeah.
Because the moment you start breaking some rules, they're gonna let you know. So good vibes to her.
No, yeah, you're right. And the way, yeah, I love when I write or when I read some of your writing, it's really comes down to like how you that conversational piece, like how people are easily to connect it. Cause then that's what makes you keep coming back. Whereas like I feel like I'm talking to just one person. Like even if millions of people read it, it's like that one person feels like they're talking just to Dave or they're talking just to Kyle. And speaking of that, kind of going back to day one, like you had this concept I heard in another podcast about like marketing your book from day one, like way before you start writing the book and getting it into other people's hands. Like, he talk about how first time authors should go about that and things that they should do before going to the launch.
I love that you brought that up. That is a really important thing that I like to tell authors is the day you decide to write a book is the day you need to start marketing it. And a lot of that is because um, when you, like, let's face it, writing a book is a very hard and long process. However, though, a lot of authors that just sit down, head down, fingers to the keyboard, and just punch it out, when it comes time that they're finished and they're ready to put it up there, all of a sudden it's hard to get everything put together, right? And so you should work in parallel. So some of the things I love to tell people is, hey, that book description I talked about earlier that's like super hard for us to do? Well, guess what? You should start working on it from day one. That should be really a part of your, when you plan to write your novel or your book, is you write your book description, because you need to make sure that your book fills that. And then on top of that, as you're writing it, because let's say it takes you 6 months, okay? Just on average, new authors really, it'll take them a couple months more than career authors. We'll put it that way. You tell people you're at work, you're at the soccer game, watching your kids, and somebody's like, you say, yeah, I'm writing a novel. First thing they're gonna ask, oh, what's it about? Well, your book description, so start saying it to them and see, watch their reaction. Like, if all of a sudden their eyes start glazing over and they're starting to pay attention everywhere else, well, guess what? You're losing the interest. Now, it doesn't mean that, the person you're talking to has to be a romance writer. But let me tell you what, though, or a reader, but if you can convince a guy like me, a sci-fi military lit RPG guy, to actually be like, oh, that romance actually sounds kind of cool. Good for you. You know what? You're doing a great job. So why not work on that and test that with people as you are writing your book? The same thing too about book covers. A little cheat, okay? And some people may cringe, but I really like this process, and I will say it out loud. I like to actually make my book cover before I write my book.
Oh, wow.
There's something concrete about that. There's something beautiful about it. It turns the book into something real. And now I feel more disciplined to writing it, because there it is, and I love having a book cover that I'm proud of. Like, I can't wait for people to see that, because that's going to make me look professional, or at the same time, like, you could write an amazing book, but if you don't get the book cover right, like, you're going to have the hardest time selling. Like, it really is. Like, I don't care who your book marketer is or how great you are at marketing. Like, it's going to be a slog. So I do like to build a book cover, right from the beginning as I'm writing the book. So, those kind of things help. Also, too, it's nothing worse than saying, hey, I wrote a book. You want to, like, help me promote it? Like,
True.
have people be a part of the process from the beginning. If you create a street team or an advanced review copy team called art teams, let them know as you're writing the chapters, help build that connection with people. One of the marketing tactics out there is that you talk to other authors in your genre, because then you could do, or you could do swaps. So when that person goes to launch their next book, you can email about it, you can promote it, you can help raise them up. And then when you go to sell your book, publish it, they'll do the same. Well, you should start building relationships with those other authors well before you have a book. So I tell authors, go follow your favorite authors that are in the same genre as you. Sign up for their email list, follow them on social media, watch what they're doing and saying. By the way, best kept secret, just hit reply to their emails.
Yeah, that's
You'd be
very true.
shocked how many times people don't hit reply. And all of a sudden, when you're replying saying, oh, that was great, love that email. Oh, I just picked up the book. Hey, this is great. Just read such and such book. They love it. But your name will start to stand out to them, so that the time that you reach out to them, they'll know who you are. They'll know that you're a real fan. You're not just somebody random coming in and saying, hey, help promote my book. So and again, we just scratch the surface. But my point is that relationships and building a following and, all of these things take time. And there's nothing worse than, I got my book, now I'm going to start doing that. No, just do them together.
Yeah.
And be disciplined about that. And like I said, you will see a much bigger and better benefit from that.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier when it's like the build it and they come. Like it's the same thing. If you wait until the book is launching or like the month or two before to get all these people to show up, you'll realize that you don't have as sometimes. I mean, at least what I've learned is like you may not have as strong a partnership or a reading base as you thought you had just because people were like, "Hey, that sounds good." It's like it's a way different. There's a way different approach when you actually have to get it out there and continue to sell and make it happen. So, no, I think that's absolute great advice. Another quick question I had actually, one of the things I admired about what you do, because when you're talking about the, starting from scratch and making sure you market in time, you've done that multiple times. Like you've gone under different pen names and done that. So like when it comes to reinventing the wheel and not trying to use what the marketing and the emails and all the stuff you've had before, like what lessons have you learned from starting from scratch?
Yeah, well, that's what forces me to keep my finger on the pulse. If you're an author and you start building up your platform in your career, selling the next book gets so much easier. Because when you write the next book, you could send out an email to your following, and pump up those sales, and then you're adding on to your knowledge and so forth. For me, every time I write a new book, I'm also writing it under a brand new pen name. I'm not building off of previous success. I'm not using the Kindlepreneur platform, which would be super easy to drive sales to, because of all the long, hard work in it. Instead, I have to figure out, okay, how do I convince Amazon to show my book? How do I make sure that my book is here? What do I do there? Oh man, the ads, like I gotta make my ads so good, because I got nothing else going, and so it's really helped me to continue to, sharpen the axe, and make sure that I stay on top of it, which is great because I kind of like it. I'm more of a discovery guy.
Yeah.
I love experimenting. I guess maybe there's a little bit of the engineer coming in there. But yeah, it's been, some people will say that's a lot of wasted calories, perhaps, but it's fun.
Yeah. Now, did you have any like big failures doing it like that, or like from that, or was it more you kind of just continue to work? And how'd you balance, writing the books and marketing for people that
Well,
find it hard
it's
to
funny
do?
is anybody who's had success probably has a mound of failures under them.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, sometimes people will say, "Oh, wow, how's it feel being an overnight success?" I was like, "You mean like 20 years in the making? Overnight success, 20 years in the making? Like, come on, like it's what it is." The biggest thing for me, and this is the biggest advice I can give people, is that you need to celebrate your wins, and you need to understand it's going to be hard. So a prime example of this is back when I first started trying to learn about online marketing. I bought a book. Okay. And this book's joke, the title, no kidding, was called How to Make Money Online. I mean, and it was. And I said to myself, okay, you know what? I'm going to do everything this thing says. Even if I think it's stupid, I'm going to do everything it says just so. Now, I don't recommend this book at all. Really, I don't. That being said, though, I did it. I spent 1 month of super hard work. Every morning, 4 to 7, every Saturday and Sunday, all day and night, working on driving these things. In the end, I made $3. $3. Now, mass majority of people would probably come back and say, Dave, what a failure. Man, you wasted all that time. I looked at it and I said, I just made $3 online, like out of nowhere. I wonder, okay, if I do this again, if I could do X, Y, and Z better, I bet you I could increase that. So I did it again and I changed things myself because now I had a little knowledge, I had a little experience. I was starting to get a little bit more intuition. So I changed some things. This time it took me 2 months. But you know what I got? I got $20.
There you go.
See? Now, again, I had just, more than 4x'd my results. And then from there, now most people would have been dejected. A quarter of a year wasted, and all you got, is $20+ and quite frankly, I probably spent more in learning and doing these things, sure. But I'm like, all right, if I was able to do those things, let me do it better. And let me change these things, and let's do this. And you know what I got? I got $500 a month from the next thing. If I had stopped after the first one, none of this would have happened. None of what I'm creating now. If I had stopped after the second one, again, same thing. None of this would be here. I'd probably still be in the military, not knocking on that, but I wouldn't be home with my kids full time. Like I get to be home. You might not hear it on the podcast, but my kid's Lego room is right next to this, and you can hear major explosions because apparently there's some like Lego Star Wars battle going on, and it's hilarious. But if the microphone's not picking up, but that gives me joy because, and so if I had not taken those steps, and just seen the beauty of it, that some people would call it failing forward. I failed forward and I built off of it. And then finally on the third try, started to see some real success that other people might say is their success. But to me, I made a couple dollars out of thin air the first time.
Yeah, and that's
I
what
will
it's
take
about.
that and learn from it.
That's what it's about. Like iterating over time, getting better. And then because what you can do is from those lessons, you can then share them to people. So then they get those same benefits and they learn from it. And it's a flywheel in all the best ways. So Dave, I really do appreciate that. The way I like to end this podcast is I always like to ask, it's a two-sided question, but you can give two different answers. What would you like to see more of in the book world?
Oh, more of in the book world. In the book world. Well, I'd love to see more lit RPG books. No, I'm just kidding. I think that initially I would love to say that there's more understanding and more support, but truth be told is that the author community has really done a lot better over the years about that. So I have a lot of hope in that. There's some great support groups out there. There's more opportunities for you to get connected with other authors. Bookum seems like one of those as well, where you can hear the stories of people and get the kind of support to know that, yeah, we're all working really hard. This is hard. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So having that support, I think, is critical.
Yep, that's good. And then what would you like to see less of in the book world?
I love to see, well, on the other side of that coin, I love to see a lot less of authors destroying authors. That can always improve. There's a lot of authors that, and I think a lot of it is sometimes there's jealousy. One of my favorite stories is like Guy Kawasaki, who's very famous for writing. Apparently there was this lady who had a PhD and she watched him give a speech and she went up to him. She's like, look, I get it. Your books are okay, but I know that my books cover more information. I don't get it. Why is it that yours sell more? And Guy's response was, it's because I'm a best-selling author, not just an author. But it's when I heard that story from that lady, I thought to myself, man, that's you go up to a guy like that and you're like, my books are better. Like, why? But truth be told is there's a lot of authors that feel really down about the fact that, hey, it might have been the third book, might have been the fourth book for this person before they took off. And, author B is on book 9 and 10 and still hasn't hit it. And so I think a lot of times there's a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of frustration. And sometimes it can come into the form of deconstructive criticism, and not enough support.
No, that's well said. Dave, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Please let us know if there's anything that's coming up in your world you'd like to share about and how we can support.
Absolutely. And again, appreciate you having me here.
Yep. All right. Take care. Have a good one.